Okay, welcome back to the video, guys. If you didn't catch the first episode, that was where we put the door together for this rustic door build. This is episode 2, so we're going to be focusing on fitting the door hardware like the hinges and the locks, and also getting the door frame finished. So make sure you leave a comment down below. If you leave a like, I would really appreciate it, and let's get straight into the video. There was a lot of bits of glue and uneven bits of wood left over behind on the door, so we're using the plane here, which is basically like a tool that you can use if the wood is uneven, it's got any like lumps or bumps. If it's too much to sand, so with that done, and the ends of the planks all smooth, it means now I can run the circular saw and trim the door, because it was I didn't know what the final height and width of the door was going to be until I had the door frame made. So yeah, so this machine is a bit of a beast, but this allowed me to trim a little bit off of the sides and off at the top and the bottom. Now I'm trying to figure out on the frame where this piece goes. I don't know the name of this piece, but if you want these things to be flush inside the door frame, then you need to measure the thickness of them and all of these pieces, really, so that you can figure out how much you need to take out of the wood for it to be completely flush. So here I'm just getting an idea of like how the lock mechanism works, and I can actually measure how far the dead bolt comes out and also how much the latch comes out. I just called it a bash plate. I mean, for me, I'm thinking of like what I should actually name the parts, so sometimes it's quite hard to think of a name for it. So now I've got those thicknesses, I need to add like a couple of millimeters to that, to where the dead bolt and the latch will go, because the whole outside area will also go down like 2 millimeters. So now we're pretty much setting up the router. It's kind of like a fancy drill in a way. It's got like different cutting parts and it spins around, and pretty much it's just like a really good tool to be able to mill out areas of wood and it to be really, really, really clean. So you have to set it up, like use a bit of wood or some sort of straight edge as a guide, because you don't want it to be like moving around when you're operating it, because otherwise the lines aren't going to come out straight. You're going to have loads of like wonky, strange grooves and stuff. So, and here the other thing you have to work out is how far you want it to plunge down, like what is the deepness. So this bit that I just dropped on the floor, that is that kind of locks in place, and that will stop it from going past the desired depth. So that's pretty much it. You know the distance away that you want to go, and you know the depth down that you want to go, and you just have to go like a bit at a time. You don't want to try and take like huge amounts of wood out. So yeah, I don't know, I find this quite satisfying to do. It gets a little bit mathematical, but the results at the end are super, super tidy, so definitely worth the effort. The only thing is like the blade is obviously, the bit leaves round grooves at the end, so if you want to have like sharp edges, you want to take the corners out, then I'm just doing that with the chisel here, because the chisel is good because it's like super sharp, and obviously it's completely straight edge, so you can cut some dead straight lines with it, and when you've only got the corner left to go, it pretty much just flies out anyway. So yeah, now it's all routed in, and we've put this bash plate in, and it ends up being quite flush. So alright, so now I'm putting the lock in place. I want to test if the lock is going to be able to fully submerge in there or not. So I tend to just scratch and colour in the areas, just so that I don't end up drilling or like routing the wrong part. And yeah, the table is a complete mess, but this is before Christmas, okay, so it's all got tidied up since. So next up, to be able to start this off, I could have started with the router straight away, which probably would have been a smarter idea in hindsight, but I went for the chain drilling method. So you're going to drill like a series of holes in a line or a chain, and then it's going to make it easier to come with the chisel afterwards and just to, connect the dots up basically. So there was one day like before Christmas and the New Year that was like really warm. It was an unusually warm day, so it meant that I could just work in the evening underneath the patio roof. I think it was like 16 or 15 degrees or something, so I did get a bit carried away on that day, and I ended up working out there until 2:30 a.m. And I wasn't tired. I was super into the project, but I had to call it a day. So that red mark near my thumb is actually my blood. It's a bit gross, but I cut my knee, and as I was kneeling on the door to do the routing, I realised that I was bleeding onto the door. So here, like, the alignment of everything is really important. You don't want to mismeasure or anything like that, so it's definitely good to just take your time. Don't drop it like I almost dropped it. So now with most of the stuff like hooked up and figured out, I can take all of the metal hardware and stuff off. I start preparing the wood for sanding and like the final finish, some kind of varnish or stain or something. It does get really frustrating having to keep on adjusting the plane, because you can kind of set the angle of how much this thing bites, and as you can see, when it bites it makes everything shake, and if you don't go with the grain of the wood and you make a bit of a mistake, it just hacks a big part out. So best to actually turn around and go the other way then. So this is not really the fun part, but you do have a lot of satisfying results. And sometimes even in January it gets too hot while you're doing this stuff, so lighten up if you have to. I spent so many hours with this tool over like the course of days and days with this thing that I ended up actually modifying it, so it actually works like a dream now. So yeah, still a long way to go in terms of sanding, but I did get a Christmas gift from my dad in the form of this sander. So maybe it's a little bit of a small belt sander for such a big door, but I was grateful anyway, because this thing actually saved me a ton of time. My dad did actually tell me like maybe not to expect too much from it, because it was a pretty cheap one. It was just something that he knew that I would need for this project, and kind of just saw it, I think, browsing, going through some groceries at Lidl. So it is the in-depth review of the Parkstone belt sander from Lidl. It did work really well, and it pretty much got 95% of the sanding done on the door, which is epic. But the downside is that it did end up breaking, because a bit of the sanding belt actually flew into the motor, and that was bye-bye on that situation. So it did this job really well, but it only lasted a couple of days. But the amount of hours of work I put it through, it probably had its whole lifespan. So maybe if they designed some of the parts a little bit better, then it would be completely fine, because it was quite a beast. So definitely had enough power. This part I thought was going to be the easiest way to route in for the hinges on the door, was actually going to be to straddle the door, because doing it from either side it's just going to wobble. So if my legs are around it, then there's no chance it can tip. And that's the finished result before any kinds of sanding. So again, it just means that the hinges, which are maybe like 4mm thick, the plate, it can actually sit flush. And I had to do some holes, because it has these little nipple things, and the nipples have to go into the holes, I guess for extra rigidity or strength or some shit, I don't know. So this is not like tuna paste. I made my own wood filler stuff. I'll make a little video on that later. It's kind of a well-known thing that you can mix like wood dust and wood glue and make your own kind of wood filler. So it turned out okay. But yeah, anyway, we got all of that stuff done, and it was time to apply some kind of final finish. So I did go for some kind of sealer of some kind. It had to be a stain because I didn't want to do pine, and I picked this one because it had like great UV resistance and water resistance. So as you can see, it came out beautifully, and this stain effect was mahogany. So yeah, painting the mahogany onto the pine with the interesting grain. I mean, someone who didn't know about wood could maybe be fooled into thinking it's mahogany. I don't really care. It's just an effect. I quite like this sort of brown. It's like quite a 90s feel for me, I think. So yeah, pretty much getting to the stage of putting some plugs into the wall and fitting the door frame, including this top piece, which the intention is to like glue that mortise and tenon in there. But when you're getting blinded by the sun, it's like probably best to just turn around sometimes. And with some jigging and poking, we pretty much managed to get it nice. I'm just using some kind of steel screws that have like a 12mm hex head on them, and they just go into some chunky plastic raw plugs. The kind of concrete blocks the house is made out of, I'm not certain like all of them are filled all the way through, so it limits like what kind of plugs and screws you can use. But pretty much it was not a problem to get everything on and get it square. It did take a little bit of tweaking here and there. This piece did need like a tiny bit of adjustment later on, but that's it, like clean as it could get. And ta-da, that is the final result. So that's pretty much it from this video, guys. The door build is over, but there is going to be a final stage because I've made a few more extra pimped out modifications for the door. So stay tuned, I'll probably bring that one out like in the next few days. And let me know what you guys thought of the video. Leave me a comment down below if you can. Give us a thumbs up or something like that, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Adios.